Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. QLPOR, as it's widely known, features a bevy of poets, spoken word artists, and live poetry readings with best-selling authors. Your host is Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Tonight, for your quintessential listening poetry pleasure, I would like to welcome Vincent J Calone to the program. The philosophy behind Vincent's poetry is based on the new Formalist school of thought. He studied under Lewis Turco, who wrote the new Book of Poetic Forms for New England Press. Although Vincent wears many hats, whether it be as a playwright, an actor, or director, his message remains the same. Why do we do what we do? How do we change it? And how can we learn, grow, and evolve? He's published numerous poems, actively participated in poetry events such as Spo-Fest and Flash Mob Poetry, and every day since August 1st, 2022, he has written a new poem based on Raven Wire poetry prompts, and he's also a proud member of the writing collective at Greater Agency. Vincenzo, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Michael. I really appreciate you and Quintessential Listening Poetry Online for having me and the time that you're going to spend with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I'm happy to. I'm quite pleased that you're here. Let's begin our poetic journey together. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. Vincenzo, what is poetry?
So to me, it's a hard question to answer, simply.
Right.
But to me, poetry is the economy of words. To use as few words as I need to tell my story. I have a short attention span.
Okay.
So
right.
I like to wrap it up in about a page or so.
Right.
So to me, poetry in the poem is like a picture or a photo or a painting. It exists in the physical form, but it has another life in its interpreted form. So that's the magic to me. What is the poem? How does it make you feel? What does it make you think about? Does it give you a warm feeling? Does it fill you with rage? Does it make you think? Does it move you? That's what poetry is to me.
Very nice. I like that. You sound like a director, an actor, playwright, the way you phrase that. Very, very nice. So why do we do, then, what we do in terms of poetry? Why is it generally important? What do you think?
Well, good poetry is like good storytelling. Good storytelling in a poem or a book or a movie can influence people. So there within is the potential to change the balance of power with the turn of a phrase or a spin of a rhyme. Poetry is everywhere in speech writing, to add copy, to nursery rhyme, to your top 40 station. It's in the morning prayers and the evening laments. From happy birthday to roadside work songs, you can't escape it. It's everywhere. Poetry exists in nature already. The poets are merely the farmers or the shepherds who raise the crop and tend to the herd.
Wow. That was truly nicely stated. Vincenzo, oh man, we're going to have a good time tonight. Yes, you did. You really did. It doesn't take much, but you really.
I really feel strongly about it. Yeah.
Wow. As you think about writing your work, what are some of the predominant things, my friend? What are you writing?
Nature, the garden, planting, growing, harvesting, the barren season, planning. And then I write man versus nature, man versus man, man versus himself. And when I say man, I mean woman, man.
Yes.
I like to visit these areas in a satirical sort of way. Mm-hmm. Much of my poetry is centered around some form of these three tropes in one way or another: birth, rebirth, hope, God, lack of God. What is life? Why? These are all themes that I like to take a stab at. People also say I have a propensity to write about things that they're thinking about or have felt in a simple and direct way, so like a fifth grader could understand them. So I write every poem so a fifth grader or sixth grader could pick it up and read it and understand it.
Very nice. Very nice. Please share a poem.
Sure. So I'm going to share a poem with you. This is one of the poems that I wrote. I wrote it on day 110, November 20th, for Ravenwire poetryprompts.com. And the writing prompt was, write about looking down at yourself from someone else's perspective. The prompt was, write about looking down at yourself from someone else's perspective. So I'll read the poem, and then I'll let you see if you can guess who or what the party is who's looking down at me. The name of the poem is called To Err is Human, or To Err is Human. Look at them upon the earth, getting born and giving birth, burying truth inside stats, arguing like dogs and cats. Vanity's their main concern, printing money just to burn, building walls and shopping malls, hanging up when hunger calls. What a silly race, what a sad planet, a wasteland of silicone and granite. They name rivers, mountains, and oceans, clear-cut forests just to make hand lotions. They'll strip a mountain to make a new car, turn to the heavens and wish upon a star. An indelible rut their wagon wheels carve. They have plenty of food, yet their people still starve. No, this is not a place for us to settle. They've already used up their ore and their metal. They had a utopia, and then they turned it sour when they gilded the calf and erected a tower. And a calf made of gold feeds only greed. They focused on want and forgot about need. Before we disembark, should we plant the seed? No, do not. The humans in waste and haste will think it a weed, rip it from the soil like everything else, or place it in a vase and put it on a shelf. We're sorry we left you. Now is not your time. To err is human. To forgive is divine. Thank you.
Wow. That's either Elon Musk or Moses.
To write about someone looking down at yourself, write about yourself from someone else's perspective.
Yes.
The perspective that I was thinking of was a Martian or an alien looking down at us and saying, sort of like those old Twilight Zone episodes.
Now how was I supposed to get a Martian?
Well, it was some sort of figure. It was a celestial being.
Okay. All right.
Could have been a Martian. Could have been somebody else.
All right. Thank you, sir. Now, when you think about writing a poem, my friend, how does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image?
That's a great question. So I'm going to borrow, I heard when you had T.A. Niles on,
yes.
He said that he's an impressionist, right? Or an expressionist. An expressionist, right? Expressionist. Yes. I love that term. So to answer your question, he said when you had him on that he thinks about things, he mulls them over, and then the images start to rub up against each other, or the concepts or the ideas start to rub up against each other or themselves. Sort of like the Big Bang. There's nothing, and then there's something. Mm-hmm. So to me, either something will spur me to write, either a physical, something that happens in my world will physically move me to write, or it'll be something that I've been thinking about, something maybe that's not been sitting well with me, whatever it may be. Or it may be I'm so moved by something else that someone has written that I write something in response to that. So that's I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how I come to write.
All right, very nice. You know, I asked you whether it was an idea, a form, or an image. The word form brings up the topic of New Formalists. Tell me more about that movement.
So there's a big harangue to do out there about the New Formalists. So a formal poet is just someone who likes to write either in form, using a specific form or group of forms, or they write a certain way with a certain meter, syllabics, syllables, or whatever they're doing for a reason, as opposed to your free verse poets. And there's always been this war between the two, and I don't think you really need to choose a side, because I was thinking about this earlier. I also have a friend who hates adverbs, and adverbs, maybe justly, this friend hates adverbs, but adverbs, you shouldn't use adverbs if you have another word that's better, or if you're just looking to pad a line or fit it. So I understand that, but I ask you a question: would a free verse poet, if they stumbled upon a rhyme, not use it in their poem at the fear of being lumped in with a formalist poet? Wow. And in the same regard, if a formalist poet came across something that didn't fit their form, would they not write it just to spite themselves? So I think that the answer to both of those questions is ridiculous, and you're going to write whatever moves you, and that's what I do. So I consider myself a new formalist poet because I like to write in forms. It's sort of like if you're running, and you put heavy hands on, right? You put heavy hands on your feet, on your ankles. You've done that before, right? You're working out, you're walking, you're running, and you have heavy hands on. You have hands on you. Maybe you put a weight vest on, and you're running and you're working out. That's what it's like to write form sometimes. You're restricted by the rhyme scheme. You're restricted by the syllable count. You're restricted by the refrain, or whatever it may be, whatever you may feel is a restriction. Then you get home, you take everything off, now you write free verse. So that's sometimes how I feel after I've been writing form for a while. If I don't have to think about all those other things, to write the free verse is sometimes freeing in and of itself. So,
all right. Before you share another poem, please share with me an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power.
So I thought about this good and hard, and I came up with an answer. And then after I came up with an answer, another thing had occurred to me after I had come up with that answer. So the example that I have was an illustrated copy of "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." I remember having those words read to me, and then reading those words and feeling them move me. Growing up Catholic, religion, God, church, especially hymns, had such a profound effect at me at such an early age. But I never realized until years later, after studying formal verse at school. But I remember the words in "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" coming to life, like there was a magic on the page. And it was there in the meter and in the rhyme. It was in the music. It really sang to my soul. I know you're probably thinking this is silly. It's a Christmas poem, But you also have to remember that, it was written. I read it as an 8-year-old, and I think it was written to sing to the soul of an 8-year-old, and that is a good example of an early run-in with poetry and how it moved me.
Very nice. Please, your poem.
Sure. So this is called Open Read. It's a poem I wrote recently after performing a lot of open reads, either online or live in person. Open read. Please don't tell me about what you were about to tell me. 24 lines, in and out, okay, 30 at max. No one needs to hear a 5-minute introduction to a 7-minute poem when you have 180 seconds on the clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Sorry. That was mean. I'm sorry. Let me start again. We're all creative beings. Who am I to say a thing? Tell us a story of the Greeks or the Romans or knights in medieval times. We'll lend you our ears. Tell us of your visions. They say that the fear of public speaking is America's biggest social fear. The fear of strangers is number 5, and the fear of failure not far behind. Go ahead. Tell me again. I couldn't quite hear you over all the thoughts in my head. I'm paying attention now. Say what's to be. Well spoken. Well said. Thank you.
You know, I'm the kind of host, when I hear a piece, there are times when I want to hear it twice. Please share that one again.
Sure. This is called Open Read. Please, don't tell me about what you were about to tell me. 24 lines, in and out. Okay, 30 at max. No one needs to hear a 5-minute introduction to a 7-minute poem when you've got 180 seconds on the clock. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Sorry. That was mean. I'm sorry. Let me start again. We're all creative beings. Who am I to say a thing? Tell us a story of the Greeks or the Romans or knights in medieval times. We'll lend you our ears. Tell us your visions. They say that the fear of public speaking is America's biggest social fear. The fear of strangers is number 5. The fear of failure not far behind. Go ahead. Tell me again. I couldn't quite hear you over all the thoughts in my head. I'm paying attention now. Say what's to be. Well spoken. Well said. Thank you.
What is the purpose of that particular poem, my friend? Talk to me.
The purpose of that poem is a message to other poets out there. Listen to your fellow poets. Even though what they're saying may not interest you or may not be what you say or agree with, listen to them. Listen to everyone. Listen to everyone's viewpoint. Don't, have patience. Everyone's going to have their turn at the dish. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And also, be polite. Don't, if it's 2 minutes, don't try to squeeze a 5-minute poem into a 2-minute or a 3-minute slot and think you're doing anybody justice by doing that, because nobody can hear what you're saying. Mm-hmm. You're missing out. If someone gives you 3 minutes and you want to read 2 very short pieces, or you want to read an intermediate piece and introduce it and take your time, I would say you're probably better off doing that than or not even caring and just blowing past the bell. And just that, to me, is the biggest sin of an open read. But I digress.
You fascinate me because you're a poet, a playwright, an actor, a director, a human being, plus a multitude of other things, and you state that your message remains the same. Why do we do what we do? How can we change it? And how can we learn, grow, and evolve? Tell me about your message, and why does it remain the same?
I guess it goes back to the first poem I read, to err is human. We just, no matter how much we try, that's why I can write a new poem every day, because we find new and interesting ways of messing up every single day.
No, I know.
And I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to be a Svengali. I don't pretend to be above my station. I'm just a guy that lives and works and writes. I'm not a smart man. I'm not a wise man. I'm not a prophet. Okay, I'm just a guy who looks at life, writes about it, tries to get a laugh, or tries to, write something a little touching. Mm-hmm. And if I could make a little change, and a few other people maybe come on board and make a little change, and that's how a movement happens.
Right. All great writers, Vincenzo, have great writing influences. I know that sounds like Lewis Turco is one of yours, but who are some of your other writing influences, and what makes them great in your eyes?
Oh, well, I thought about this question long and hard, and I tried to write an answer down. And
all right.
What are we talking about here? Are we talking about like Smokey and Barry Gordy? Are we talking about hits? Are we talking about Hitsville? Are we talking about the 60s? Are we talking? When you say who are your favorite writers, it's just like saying what I mean by that is I am a fan, a big fan of the 30s, 40s, 50s, the whole American Songbook.
All right.
Up to Motown, up through Motown, up through the 60s, into the 70s, some of the 80s. It's just I like to write. I like to listen to music. I like to write music. I like to write songs. I like to write song verse. So when you ask me who my influences are, Jim Morrison of the Doors was a poet. He was also but I also like Charles Bukowski. I also like Robert Frost. Who doesn't? I also like, all of the Formalists, Margaret Atwood. It's just. But then I like Walt Whitman. I like George Wallace. George Wallace is, he's still carrying the torch today of the Beats, all the Beats, Ferlinghetti, Kerouac, all the Beats. Ginsberg. So it's like I can't really say I've been influenced by everything. So I can't say that this is my favorite or I gravitate. Everything. There's so much, and there's so much to discover. And as soon as I think I know everything, someone will turn me on to something else, and I'll be like, I've never even heard of this. Like I've heard about speculative fiction last month, and I never heard of it before last month. So go figure.
What is it? What is speculative fiction?
Speculative poetry and fiction.
Yes.
I guess it's just creating these universes and alter universes and ultraverses. I'm not an expert on it all, so I'm assuming that's what it is. But there's all these books and contests and groups that exist purely on that, and I had no idea it was there, and it was existing there all the time, just like the Matrix, existing in plain sight. Didn't even know about it, but there it is.
Right. Now, do you come from a literary background? And I guess the specific question is, what did you learn growing up about writing?
Well, I had your classic Catholic grade school education, and then I learned the rudimentary stuff, I guess, in high school. I went to college. I went to Nassau Community College. I got involved in film and TV production, and then I heard that you could get a bachelor's in public relations from Oswego. So I went to SUNY Oswego, which is up on the Great Lakes, beautiful school, and I was going for communication studies with public relations, and I started to take poetry and drama classes up there. I just fell into it. So there, with the Brad Corbis-Meyer's drama sequence and Lewis Turco's poetry sequence, I really came into my own, and I felt I kind of was like writing all the time, like as early as I can remember, 15, 16. I was writing from a cathartic, young angst point of view. It wasn't until I went away to college that I really hone and learn what I was doing and shape it. And then after college, I spent a good amount of time not writing at all, but still working, like doing journalism, writing band reviews, writing dining reviews, writing music reviews, CD reviews. So I was still writing. I just wasn't writing creatively. I wasn't writing poetry. I wasn't writing drama. And I wasn't writing plays yet. Mm-hmm. So when I was working, I worked at the Good Times magazine and the Long Island Entertainment magazine, where I met John Blenn with a B, Blenn, and right. we worked there at the magazine, the three of us, him, his wife Joni, so John Blenn, Joni Blenn, and myself, and then a few contributors. We basically ran the magazine. We did all the writing. We sold all the ad copy. We delivered the magazine, and we had it printed locally, and we did that for about 2 years, 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And then the magazine folded, but then John, who was the magazine editor-in-chief, also had a theater company called Middle Class American Productions, and I got involved doing drama, and that's how I worked my way back into writing creatively, and that was about 7 or 8 years ago. And then I just got back into poetry less than a year ago, so that's brought me full circle to where I am today.
Less than a year ago?
Less than a year. The first poem that I read, I can read to you. I read it at Jack Jack's in Babylon Village. The first Thursday of every month, Jack Jack's. Deborah Hauser runs a wonderful, wonderful poetry open mic at Jack Jack's in Babylon Village through the Babylon Arts Council and the Babylon Village Arts Council. And I'll read for you if you want the first poem that I read there. So this poem is called Roger That. It's in my chapbook that I wrote during COVID. Everyone wrote a chapbook during COVID. I wrote one too. It's 40 poems and songs, and it was just a self-published chapbook that I wrote myself. Called Unbound, and this is the poem out of that chapbook. It's called Roger That, and it is a post. Excuse me.
Yes.
It is a poem that I wrote to Roger Waters in the event of his passing. I wrote it sort of as an elegy, an open letter to Roger Waters, and it's also a letter from Roger himself to the other Roger in the band, Sid, who went by Sid because there were two Rogers. So Sid. So this is a poem that I wrote from Roger to Sid, and from me to Roger, and from all the fans to Roger after he's still alive, after he's gone. But I wrote it now, so it's called Roger. It's called Roger That. Roger That, and it was the first poem that I ever read at Jack Jack's, and it's not even been a year. So,
wow.
Roger That. All right. Among the snowy trees, you brought the world to its knees, feeding the wants and the needs. Through a frosted window pane, you feel the pain. From the snowy hills, from Gloucester to Notting Hill, you find you're on the coast again, cozy, but it ain't no cliffs of Dover. There's always a cause and there's always hope out there. Roger, my old friend, here we are again. You've lost yourself inside yourself again, and I wish you were here again, but you're off on a crusade. Early in our days, in the studio you amazed, but soon the sessions became crazed with the ravings of a loon. Well, at least you were in tune. In those early days, when we were sheepish, you would say, well, who am I kidding? The dogs had their way, and we were part of the machine. Is there always hope out there? Because there's always a cause. Roger, my old friend, here we are again, my friend. We find ourselves alone at the end, peering out a frosted window pane. Have we become the pigs, cresting on the wave? I could not know you. How could any of us? You burned bright like a furnace and rang loud as a bell. Although we knew you all too well, it soon all went to hell. one which you helped pave and forge. And although you may not have been, and although that may not have been your intention, we are still on the same road. In the snowy pines, you wrote the music and the lines, tilled the earth and planted the seeds, through the dry days and the rains. Deep in the snowy fields, from winter wheat to summer corn, you sheltered the weak and helped the scorn. Now your life's at the candle's end. There's always a cause and there's always hope out there. Roger, my old friend, here we are again. Have you found yourself inside yourself? And oh, how I wish you were here. For just one more year as the memory starts to fade. Thank you.
Wow. As I was listening, I was also wondering, wanted to ask you, what was it about poetry, the art and craft of poetry, that brought you back?
Well, when I was writing drama, I found myself writing characters that were sort of poetic type characters, like their lines, or maybe there was some poetry there was some free verse there, or they would speak. They would be, comedic tropes. So the drama and the poetry, I don't think you could separate the two. Because there's poetry and drama, and there's, a lot of drama and some poetry. So they kind of go hand in hand. And I don't think I ever stopped. I just stopped producing. I stopped writing. I was always thinking. I was always, look, I mean, I've been rewriting. There are some poems I've been rewriting for the 30 years. Mm-hmm. There's two schools of thought out there as far as poetry goes. There's the purist school of thought, which like the Kerouac school of thought. You write it in the moment. You never change it. It is what it is. You're never going to be able to replicate the feelings that you felt at that time. So that's it. Don't change a word. And then there's the revisionist school of poetry that if you only have a certain amount of words, a certain amount of lines, a certain amount of syllables, you just keep tinkering with it until it's perfect. And somewhere in between, I think, lies the truth between the two of them.
That's one of my questions that I ordinarily ask, that some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's others you can do to correct or improve it, or others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. Your take on it. So you're saying you're somewhere in the middle.
Well, I equate it to a song, poetry to a song. You write a song, it's out there in the ether now. It takes on a life of its own.
Yes.
Like think about any earworm that you know, any song that you can't get out of your head. Is the same with a poem, good or bad. Like Joyce Kilmer's Trees. I don't know if you're familiar with that poem, but the poem Trees. You probably heard it before.
About the little boy, and he sat beside the tree, and later in his life, he decided to cut the tree down. Is that the one? No.
Look, it's okay. I'm sorry. It's very sing-songy. Like it's overly sing-songy. I thought that I've never seen a thing as lovely as a tree.
Yes. Okay.
And, right. And what everybody, poor Joyce Kilmer, what everybody gets on him about was he was giving human attributes to something that was non-living in sort of an overly sweet, syrupy sort of way. So that poem, when he wrote it, I don't think he meant it to become such a lightning rod for critics hundreds and hundreds of years after he wrote it. So, yes, poetry, once you write it, you don't own it. I mean, you own it. I mean, you wrote it, but do you own it? No, I guess not. It's out there. People will take it and they will make it their own. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. Jack White of the White Stripes, he wrote Seven Nation Army, right? You know how the song goes, right?
No, I don't. Actually, tell me.
You know,
I don't know that.
dun, 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 dun. Well, anyway, it's just those over and over and over again.
Yes.
Soccer teams from across the world different countries have adopted it as their chant. They chanted in the stadium. So, do you think that when Jack White was writing the song, you know, on his guitar, using his homemade amplifier, that it was ever become what it was? So, to answer your question, yes, poetry can take on a life of itself.
Yes, it can. And you wouldn't know this on another note. I majored in radio, television, and motion pictures. I knew I liked it for some reason. I majored in radio, television, motion pictures at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. My dream in life was to become a television producer. Of course, it never happened. But we share a similar background in that regard.
Well, you were producing this, and you're doing a fine job.
Well, thank you, sir. On that note, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back. All right, I like that.
Thank you.
We are back. I am Michael Anthony Ingram. I'm here with Vincent J Calone. Vincenzo, question for you. All right, question for you, sir. Are you there? Vincent?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, is a poem letting your guard down or building a wall?
Okay, so is this a trick question?
Could be.
Because it's certainly a loaded question.
Talk to me.
Is a poem letting your guard down or building a wall?
Building a wall.
All
yes.
right. All right. So I'm going to say both. Neither.
Okay.
Poetry to me is the opportunity to hold someone's attention long enough to say, hey, listen, I'm going to tell you something which I thought was important enough to write down, hopefully edit, research, mull over, antagonize over, change, tear up, throw out, forget, remember, rewrite, print, re-edit, save, include in a book, submit it to others to read, pay to print, tell my friends and family about it, and then read it to you today. So to me, it's deeply personal. But in the end, if it doesn't move you or make you feel something, did I just waste my time? So I believe the answer is half of the fun is in getting there, the trip,
right.
The journey.
Yes.
Some poems are doorways and some are windows. We choose to open them or keep them shut. As creative beings, we must open the door when opportunity knocks or throw open the window sash. Right? To let in the sweet fragrance of creativity.
Right. The sweet fragrance of creativity. I love it, man. Listen, does it hurt you to write poetry? If not, why not?
Does it hurt me to write poetry? So I want to understand your question.
Yes.
Does it hurt me to write poetry?
Yes. If not, why not?
I have. My wife says to me all the time. She says, "Why?" She goes, "I love that poem. Why don't you write more like that?" And I was and I was having this conversation with TA the other day, and we were talking about the well and going to the well, and I said, sometimes I write a poem about my dad or about the relationship that we had. We had a wonderful relationship, don't get me wrong, but he died. He died. My daughter is going to be 21 in March. He died 20 days after she was born. So it's sort of a bittersweet, I for me to write poems about him and about the time we were very close before he passed away, even though it's 20 years ago.
Yes.
It's like going to the well, and it's hard to go to the well all the time, every day, and not feel the punch, the gut punch. So TA said, I'm afraid if I go to the well too much, there's not going to be anything left. And TA said, what are you talking about? It refills itself every night, don't you know? You're gonna keep on going. You're gonna keep living. You keep experiencing stuff. So the well is gonna keep refilling itself. So, there's some stuff that I write about that is very personal. It's hard, and I try to distance myself sometimes from the very, very personal feelings by creating characters and changing names and hiding behind humor. But you know how it is sometimes.
I do know how it is. Actually, I really do. And I was wondering, has a poem you've written ever humbled or frightened you?
Well, humbled or frightened?
Yes.
I want to read a poem for you. That humbled me.
Okay. Right.
I wrote it when I was in college. Okay. And the poetry, you don't mind, right?
No, of course not.
To answer your question. So yes. the form is called the Trenta-Sei. Trenta, capital SEI. Trenta-Sei, which translates to 36 in Italian. So the form is you take the first. So there's six stanzas. Each stanza has 6 lines in it, and each line of the first stanza follows the first line of each following stanza. So, for instance, the second line of the first stanza is the first line of the second stanza. The third line of the first stanza is the first line of the third stanza. The fourth line of the first stanza is the first line of the fourth stanza, and so on and so forth. It's a lot more complicated than it really is. I'm making it sound a lot more complicated than it really is. But anyway, it was something that I wrote, and I had a hard time connecting and making it sound fluid from stanza to stanza, because what I was doing was I was rapping the stanzas, and I was trying to make it sound conversational, and I was having a difficult time doing it. So this poem humbled me because it took a whole weekend to finally get it right. So the poem is called Speak Well, and it is a Trenta-Sei variation. Do you know someone who always says you know when they mean to say something more specific? Like, do you know? Know what? Know what? Like a sometimes substituted for you know. Yes, I know. I know someone who always says you know when they're trying to find a word on the tip of their tongue, but they're not sure what they want to say. You know what I'm saying? I mean, when using a sentence explicitly, to hinder, hinder the flow, Oh, I know. You mean when they mean to say something more specific, but they're nervous and comes out. I know. Though sometimes it's irritating. I know what you mean. You mean to say something and comes out instead. Do you know? Know what? Know what? You haven't told me anything. How can I possibly know what you're saying? Stop saying you know. There's a word on the tip of my tongue for people like you. You're like, vague. Like a sometimes substitute for Like I hear what you're saying. Like I'm with you. Like I understand. what you're trying to tell me. I comprehend the meaning of your point. Yes, I know. Like is also sometimes substituted for Yes, I know. I know someone who does that all the time. Like, it usually doesn't bother me, but I think it's contagious because I find myself becoming kind of annoying. Finished. Thank you.
I really like that.
Yeah. So anyway, if you were looking at the paper, you would see that the first line of each stanza is a line taken from the first stanza.
Oh wow! Speaking of that, Peach.
and growing up, that was how we used to speak. We used to say "like" right. And all the time.
Yeah, it's true. I know that. I know. Yeah, I know.
And coming from a media background, you understand all those vocalized pauses are like,
yes. Well, and that brought up another question, my friend. Your voice is extremely distinctive. What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice, if there's a relationship that you've discovered?
So my inner voice, I think, is my voice as a poet. My speaking voice is my voice speaking to myself when I'm speaking. So a lot of times I'll write something and I'll say, wow, this is great. This sounds great. And then I'll read it out loud and I'll go, oh, not so much. What was I thinking? But in doing that, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Your perception of yourself and your projection of yourself are often two very different things. So your perception of yourself and your projection of yourself. So I try to keep them as faithful as possible. So if I write something and I feel very strongly about it, I do a workshop every Wednesday with J.R. Turk, Judy Turk, the Purple Poet, in on Long Island at the Farmingdale Library, and I'm open to suggestion. I love suggestion. I love criticism. I love critiques because my inner voice sometimes is an unfaithful narrator. I've learned that sometimes I'm writing something and I think it to be true, but once I workshop it, I find it not to be true, and I think that's invaluable. And anybody who's a writer out there, I strongly suggest you get involved in a workshop because it will change your perception of how you write, and it will shape your inner voice. And it took me a long time to develop my voice. Be faithful to your voice. My biggest challenge was finding it, and then once I found it, as soon as you find it, people are going to tell you that it's wrong, it's not for you. That's because I don't know why, but they'll say get rid of that, don't do this. If you like what you're doing and if you're comfortable and you find it works for you, don't try to reinvent the wheel. I'd say keep an open mind, listen to different, listen to different poets, listen to where they're coming from, and you'll shape your own voice. But to answer your question, I try to keep my voice as faithful as I possibly can. My inner voice, my outer voice, all the same projection of the same picture.
Very nice. Tell me about a poem, my friend, that you were proud of writing, but afraid to share for fear of possible misinterpretation.
Okay, so I wrote this poem.
Well, you quickly jumped on that one. You didn't have to think about it. You were like right there.
Because I remember you asking the same question to a couple other.
Okay.
This is what happens when you. I see. I remember them being aghast at the question, and I said to myself, I better have myself a poem for when he asks me that question.
Okay.
So I'll be ready to answer it. But anyway, right. This is a poem that I wrote in Unbound, and it is an introspective poem, and it is a poem that I wrote. how do I introduce this without giving it away? It's everyone is. I was just talking about perception and projection. So
Yes.
they say perception is reality, right? Or reality is perception. Perception is reality in the world that we live in. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. If that's what the perception is, that's what everybody remembers. So I was trying to write a poem that questioned the perception of me or other people like me, and I just was unsure of how it would be accepted at the time. So this is as it was written about a year ago. It's called Through the Prism Sublime. Through the Prism Sublime. When we pause and peer through the prism sublime, do we see? What do we find in the prisons of our mind? When we stop to look at black and white, wrong and right, is it as clear as an open space, this problem we have with race and rights, and the riots lead to wars and deaths, gasping for another breath? Can we occupy the same place, or will we end this human race this time? When I look at you, I see myself through the prism in my mind. When I look at you upon the shelf, framed in the present perfect time. I know you will fight for what is right and what we have failed to write. It is as clear as an open window pane. I feel your pain and your fright. When you stop and look at white and black, don't turn back, do what's right. And as I write this, I know more wars of words will add to the fight, and the riots lead to wars and death, gasping for another breath. Can we occupy the same place, or will we end the human race this time? When I look at you, I see myself through the prism in my mind. When I look at you upon my shelf, framed in the present perfect time. When we pause and peer through the prism sublime, what do we see? What do we find in the prisons of our mind? When we stop to look at black and white, wrong and right, is it as clear as an open space, this problem that we have with race and rights, and the riots lead to wars and death, gasping for another breath? Can we occupy the same place, or will we end this human race this time? When I look at you, I see myself through the prism in my mind. When I look at you upon my shelf, framed in the present perfect time. Thank you.
Wow. Need a second too. Now, you were concerned about potential misinterpretation of that piece? Tell me more.
Well, when I wrote it, I was referring to a picture of myself that I was looking at, an earlier, younger picture of myself, speaking to myself today and saying to myself, talking to the picture, to myself saying, if you why didn't you, if you only knew then what you know now, and would you have, just all the ifs, the if and the whats and the, you say to yourself, how did we get here and why?
Yes.
But I didn't want it to be misinterpreted because I wasn't writing it from a racially charged point of view. So I didn't want that to be reflected in the writing.
Well, that brings up my all-time favorite question that I've asked everybody every week for the last, sometimes 4 times a week for the last 5 years. We live in a world where there's good, bad, ugly, and indifferent based on so many different things. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern day society? Sometimes even I trip over that.
What is the role of the poet?
Yes.
So I think that the role of the poet is and has always been to point out the inequities and to question why. Accept nothing at face value,
Mm-hmm.
Ask why 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
When you think you have the answer, ask why again, and then ask how. Poetry is the original journalism.
All right.
Which I know today is painted in a bad light, like it's a dirty word. But who are the poets but the modern day town criers pointing out this isn't right, or tell me what you think it is. I may fix it. Poetry is, to me, essential in today's society. They say a picture paints 1,000 words.
Yes.
So just think about how many poets you need to send the same message. You could have one cartoon, you know what I mean? or you could have 1 or 2 strong poems. So when I was poetry is everywhere. It permeates everything, and we don't even know it. Like you said, you were going to be a TV producer, right?
Yes, true.
Ad text, ad copy. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. The news copy. It's almost poetry in and of itself. You want to give all of the news as fast as possible in as little amount of words as possible. I mean, to me, when you asked me what poetry is, I told you that poetry to me is the economy of words.
Yes.
Yes, to use a little amount of words as possible to get my point across. Like Judy J.R., the Purple Poet, she says that the length of a poem should be like a woman's dress, short enough to keep your interest, but long enough to tell the story.
Okay.
So
okay.
That's what I think. So what do I think today? What is the role of the poet in modern day society today? Mm-hmm. People don't have any attention span at all today. So poetry has become microverse, flash poetry, flash fiction. Now they're like, write a poem in 6 words. I mean, look, I'm a formalist, but crazy now. 6 words? It's like, all right, well, I mean, I like drabbles. Drabbles are 100 words, so that's something. I mean, if you could tell a story in 1,000 words, can you tell the same story in 100 words? So my point is that what is the role of the poet? I don't even think kids today. My daughter's going to be 21. I couldn't sit her down long enough and have her listen to a 20-line poem or a sonnet. She just, they're on to the next thing like that. So
yes.
I don't know if the poet today is the same poet that my dad had or that I had in my day. It's changing and it's evolving, and it may be past me. I'm sorry to say. I may have missed it. I may have missed the boat. But anyway, I'll keep printing my my homemade chapbooks at home and giving them to my friends and family.
All right. Hey, send me one. Well, one of the things that people talk a lot about is accessibility of meaning in terms of a poem. My question to you, my friend Vincenzo, should one employ a lot of mental energy to solve a poem?
Okay, so I love this question, and I'm going to tell you, I've thought about this many times.
I can tell when you like them. All right.
I've thought about this. I've mulled this over. I've turned it over in my mind many times, and the answer is yes, no, and maybe.
Maybe so.
Because you have to have any poem that's worth its weight in salt or gold. Has to be immediately, like I mentioned, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas before. People, I would say arguably, next to Joyce Kilmer's Trees,
yes.
That's probably one of the most widely recognized poems in the United States, I would say, maybe even the world. So there's a lot to it. Me being a poet, I look into it, I dissect it. So is everybody going to do it at the same level that I'm going to do it? No. But do I expect them to do that? No. I, on the same regard, will try to write something that a fifth grader or a sixth grader can read, understand, take something from it, but maybe I'll bury some Easter eggs in there, or I'll poem within a poem, or hidden meanings, or maybe I'll put an acrostic in there, or I'll have something with the end rhyme or the head rhyme, or do something in the body of the poem, something allude to another poem, do something in it that's not readily accessible at face value, just looking at it. Maybe you have to stumble upon a word or trip upon, something that unravels something else. That's the way I like to write. I like to write at many different levels at the same time. So that way somebody could come back to the poem maybe 5-10 years later and go, oh, well, he was alluding to this, and that's what he meant with this, and I understand now. There's a method to his madness.
Now, you've written a poem. So many questions I want to ask you, my friend, but I know you've written a poem every day.
Every day since
every day.
Every day since August 1st. Yes.
All right.
Today.
Okay. So people.
I'm up to day 125.
125. People are potentially expecting something from you every day. Am I correct?
Yes.
Now,
maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think I'm the only one that reads the poem I write every day, but that's fine.
Okay, so you post it. You post it. Yeah, you do post it. Here's my question. Do you try to be original, or do you deliver what you think your readers want when you write this poem?
So, all right. So as far as the poem per day, so what I do is Jana, who I met from the 24-hour poetry marathon that happens in June. So I met her. I knew her through that, and I heard she was doing the poetry prompt website, Ravenwire Poetry Prompts at Facebook. So she posts the poems usually a day or two before the whole month, the prompts. So I'll look at them briefly, but I really won't study them. So I don't really know like the 5th or 6th or 7th day. I may know the first day. I may know the second day. I generally look at them either the night before or that morning, and I'll plant a thought in my mind. I've been writing different forms lately. I made up a new form of my own that I wrote. I wrote a bunch of drabbles, the 100-word poems. I got to write something every day. So I didn't want to just resort to a haiku a day.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep it at least the length of a drabble, 100 words. I wanted to make it a challenge, so I wanted to do a good amount of them in form. And I wanted them all to be new poems. And if not new, I wanted them, because there are some poems that I keep rewriting over and over and over again. I wanted them to be the concept, a new concept. So, I may steal a line from an old poem, but they're basically all new poems. So do I write something for the people who are reading it, or do I write – I don't even think of that. I don't think about anything other than what is the message for today. It's sort of like each one of them is almost like a parable or a short story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And whatever they may say that day is the message for that day. Now, granted, sometimes I reiterate the same message day after day after day because no one seems to be listening to me, or or I just like to hear myself talk. But that's what I generally do. I write. If they like it, great. If they don't like it, sorry. I'm just creating.
Well, we've reached my favorite part of the program. I'm not sure you know what it is, but this is what I call a mini poetry concert, where you share 3 to 4 poems back to back, no interruptions from me. Now, Vincenzo, the stage is yours.
Okay. Do you want me to introduce each one?
That would be nice, yes.
Okay. So this was a Ravenwire poetry prompt poem of the day, and this was day 95. the prompt was write a poem based on an image. So Jana puts up 6 pictures a month, and I kind of wrote this as an acrostic. The image was an image of a wooded path in the forest. It looked like it was an earthen path. So the form that I created, syllabics. Now, the clicks is just the Roman numeral CLXXX for 180, for the number 180, because there are 9 syllables per line. There's 5 stanzas, 4 lines per stanza, so 9 times 5 times 4 is 180 syllables. And the name of this poem is called Well Trodden. We found the well-traveled path of sorts, used by smugglers and other cohorts. For years it remained undisturbed, lost in the forest glade, hidden by trees. The lane was shady, a thoroughfare for travelers, huddled in the moonlight, twice as dangerous in the daylight, and deadly in inclement weather. The well-trodden track had its secrets. Whispers were, it led to a railroad, but not the kind with wood and steel tracks. This convoy was built upon their backs. Every branch broken, every footfall led us further into that black past. A nail on a tree held a lantern, illuminating, alerting us, guiding us safely through the thicket. This is why we protest and picket. No matter how painful the road home, it's easier worn when not alone. Thank you. This poem is called Appearances Are Deceiving, and it's a drabble. And the prompt was, use the line, appearances are deceiving. So I just titled it, Appearances Are Deceiving. So it's a drabble. It's exactly 100 words. Ask any unsuspecting prey, and to them it isn't funny. Trust is broken, lives are lost, scattered, tossed, like a big shot and his money. Appearances are deceiving. Just go ask the meek. Appearances are deceiving. It's just the truth which I seek. I love to take you at face value. I'd love to just take you at your word. My God, how bizarre does that sound? How strange, how utterly absurd. It's all about trust but verify. Can no one tell the truth? John Lennon was right. And now in hindsight, appearances are deceiving. So just give me some truth. Thank you. This is called Teach a Man to Fish. And this is also clicks syllabics. Teach a man to fish. Fixes it all, right? No? Wasn't that what they taught us? Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime. Sounds simple, right? Well, what if there's no fishing rod? What if there's no fishing line? What if there's no ocean or any fish left to catch or stove to cook on or knife to clean and fillet it so? What if there's no What if there's no more hunger, or belly to fill, or need to nourish? What if the man knows how to fish but chooses not to? What if the man hates fish? Maybe he's allergic. What's next? Do we force feed him the tuna raw, like an obstinate child? Send him to his room without dinner, with hunger still unsatisfied? We think we know what's best. Open up, chew, and swallow. And this next one is an Italian sonnet, and it is also a drabble. It is called Alien to Ourselves. As we stare further into space, alien's a funny word, almost unheard. Our own skin now foreign to us. How absurd. We don't even sound like ourselves. This place not familiar, our surroundings, no trace of what we call home. Everyone's perturbed. We're all in a bad mood. Do not disturb signs posted. We've come to an about face. They are drowning in the waves. searching for something we've already found. The sound, the fury, the fight to the death. They see Lady Liberty through the haze. Firm in your position, you stand your ground, waiting on us, breathing their last breath. That's 4.
All right. You know, Vincenzo, they say to see the world with complete honesty, one should look to comedians, musicians, artists, and poets. What do you think emerges naturally from your work, my friend? What emerges from you?
Well, people have told me that I'm funny.
Okay,
like
all
I'm
right.
a comedian.
All right.
I just I don't know, like there are certain poets that are dark and brooding and you know, the end is near type poets.
Yes.
I thought I was like that when I was younger.
Okay.
I was very into the ego poetic I and myself, and as I got older, I started to think about things a little differently and look at the world a little differently, to the point where satire plays I think a big role in my writing now.
Mm-hmm.
I like to satirize. I like to look at the world and say, look, this is a crazy place. Let's think of a couple new ways to
mm-hmm.
you know, pass the time and make it funny and have
mm-hmm.
a laugh. Maybe write something a little touching.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a hate. There's a lot of poets out there that you know, is spitting rage and
right.
casting shade. I'm not about that at all. I don't you know, I'm not naming any names, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of guys out there and girls out there that everything's about them and about you know, look how bad I am and about
mm-hmm.
you know, everything. Like I said, I got away from that ego poetic guy a long time ago.
Okay.
To now, you know, I'll write a poem and I'll think to myself, let me remove all the I's in this poem. How would this poem sound if I changed all the I's to yous, or
mm-hmm.
to we's, or to us? Does it change? Does it change the poem? What if I change the I's to, and what if I create a character and give the character a funny name? You know, it doesn't, because everything's not always about me. I write things sometimes and my wife's like, no, it never happened. Why'd you write that? Why'd you say that? I'm like, what are you talking about? I said, do you understand that if I write only what happens in my lifetime, it's going to get very old very quickly and no one's going to care? Of course, that's what fiction is. You're creating a universe. You're creating these things. Of course, we draw from what we know. Of course.
Yes. Yes.
But we have to be able to have the freedom to do that. So, to answer your question, I don't know. I'm still looking for the answer.
Do you think you were meant to be a poet, Vincent?
Well, that's another good question. For as long as I can remember, I've written. Okay. I've written things down. I have a copy of every poem I've ever written.
Oh, wow.
Somewhere. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
On paper. I have a hard copy of everything I've ever written. I mean, I'm nowhere near the purple poet of writing a poem a day for 18 years.
Yes.
Or some of these other tour de forces. But I have a lot of poems. And was I meant to be a poet?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's not like you go to your guidance counselor in high school and they say, yeah, you know, you've been looking out the window a lot, writing on your desk. I think the career path for you is poet.
Okay.
So I think we kind of fall into it.
Okay.
Anybody that considers themselves to be a poet, I don't think they ever. I've always written, so I don't know what, like TA said, that he's not a poet. He's an expressionist, right?
Yes.
I don't know if I consider myself a poet, but I don't know if I'm a poet.
Okay.
Per se.
Well, what surprises you most about being, let's say, a writer, poet, whatever you want to call it? What surprises you most about the ability to be able to write? be able to share?
The joy that it brings other people when I write something from my heart and from my soul.
Okay.
And when someone who I don't know writes me, calls me, and says, wow, you wrote that poem and you explained exactly how I felt, or how did you know I was going through that, or I guess that's all. We're all part of the universal mind somehow.
Yes,
and
yes.
To latch onto that, it gives me the greatest joy. It gives me the greatest joy and sense of accomplishment, writing something that someone else reads that brings joy to their day, or makes them think, or influences them in some sort of way where it makes them think about something they may not have thought of before, and they say perception is reality, right? So
yes.
it opens their mind now to maybe an idea or a concept that they hadn't thought of. That to me is what makes it all worth it.
You know, we've almost reached the end of our poetic journey, but I'd like you to favor us, if you will, with one final piece to take us home.
All right. So I told you I had a bunch of poems I wrote about my dad and about going to the well and about how it's painful at times. So I wrote this poem. I read it at one of our poetry groups on a Saturday at the East Meadow Library, and the prompt was, it was day 96, and the prompt was, choose a song, use a line in the lyrics from that song. So the song that I chose was Don McLean's American Pie.
All right.
And the line from the song was, a long, long time ago, I can still remember how the music used to make me smile. So that would be the epigram. So the name of the poem is called A Beat Up Radio. And the epigraph is, a long, long time ago, I can still remember how the music used to make me smile. Hearing your favorites through the static and buzz reminds me now of how lucky I was. Around 7 a.m., after breakfast, you'd take to the backyard, let out the cats, and light your cigar. Too early for burgundy. Percolated coffee filled the air. I was barely awake, but still very aware. When you plugged in the radio outside, under the awning, exposed to the elements while I was still yawning, there for years covered in dirt, paper cone curled, selector knob frozen in place. As it crackled to life, you'd cry, lot of work, calling upstairs, VJ, let's go, pick up the pace. You'd get one station if you were lucky most days. It was your AM favorite, the music of our lives. Cheshire Cat's smile gradually filled your face while tending to your fig tree or sharpening your knives. Back then, oldies were different, not like the oldies of today. The Andrews Sisters at 9 a.m., and then Frank and Dean by noon. And Elvis, oh, how the king ruled the air. He, like you, left us way too soon. You were a man of simple needs, never wanting for what you had not. Many times we offered to replace that broken box. You refused. You refused, but thanked us a lot. And there it sat and played for nearly 20 years, decaying on that shelf. It was the last thing that I threw out when your widow sold the house, and I made a pact with myself to get an old radio just like yours. Now I'm happy to report I have one of my own today. But as much as I fiddle with the dial, adjust the antenna, and repeatedly press play, I just can't seem to capture the magic of that day. Thank you.
Wow. What a beautiful poem.
Yes, thank you. That's called Going to the Well.
Yes. Wow.
So Thank you very much. I really appreciated the time that you spent with me. The time just flew by.
It really did. How can listeners find your work, Vincenzo?
So, look, I'm not promoting anything. I don't have a chapbook. I don't have a book out. I've written 5 or 6 chapbooks. They're all self-published.
Okay.
I printed them myself. I'm on Ravenwire Poetry Prompts on Facebook. If anybody is interested and they want to contact me on Facebook, they can just send me a friend request, and I will hook up with you that way. Just Google my name or search it on Facebook. You have it in the spelling, and then I will send you. If you're interested, I have a few chapbooks left. I'm gearing up with a publisher to print a collection of works, but that's not going to happen probably until the summer. I'm also looking at a couple other things. You can contact me on Facebook under Vincent Calone. Can I share my email address?
If you like.
Is that okay? My email address is JuliusDad at AOL. That's JEWELD IASD as in David, A as in Apple, D as in David at AOL.com. So it's JEWELIASDAD at AOL.com. Julie is my daughter's name, so it's JuliusDad at AOL.com.
Well, you've answered my last question. I was going to ask, what's next for you creatively?
So, I'm doing a lot of things. I'm doing a murder mystery theater right now. I'm writing, acting, directing one-act plays. I also wrote a full-length 2-act called The Bathroom Sink. That I'm very busy. I'm doing a radio play of It's a Wonderful Life. Yes, in the next 2 weekends in Lindenhurst, where we live at the South Shore Theater Experience in Lindenhurst. It's the 11th and the 18th. So, and then we'll be doing a collection of one-act plays. I'm also going to be at Jack Jack's in February. I'll also be at Neir's in Queens in February. Neir's is a great little spot. It's actually one of the oldest continually operating taverns in the United States. It's been operating continuously for 196 years, 197 years, and they do an open mic every second Thursday of the month, which is this Thursday coming up. So anyway, that's the best way. I'm not looking to push anything or sell anything right now. I've just been doing Spo-Fest, a couple other open mics. Spo-Fest is the first and last Tuesday of the month. There's also the Lehigh Poets, which is excellent. Who else? Uncloistered Poetry on Sundays. We just did a thing through Poetry X Hunger and the Poetry Project this past Saturday. You can still get in on it. I'll share the link with you. There's a poetry auction for hunger, which a really great cause. We just did it this Saturday, and we're looking to. It was actually like a phrastic in reverse, where they wrote the poems, and then the artists painted the pictures to the poems. So it's in reverse how they normally do it, and they're auctioning the photos off. So that's basically what I do. The J.C. Wayne for the Poetry Project. She does a thing every month, which is excellent also. So I've been keeping busy with that. I've also been keeping busy with the drama and the local theater. So.
Well, you were going to share a bit about your writing collective at Greater Agency.
So there's this It's a funny story. So Brader Agency was actually my Oswego drama professor, Brad Corbismeyer. He created this website called Brader Agency, and it was a representation agency for all of his creative friends, writers, artists. So he had me on, and I sent him something. I had one of my pieces published in Fresh Words, International Literary Journal, and he was going to repost it. And when he went to repost it, he found out that somebody had squatted on his webpage, and when it was ready to be renewed, they renewed it, and now they're holding his website for ransom. So wow. If you go to Brader Agency, it's going to be a dead link because somebody's holding that website for ransom right now. And the inside joke was he sent the message to all the creative people in the group, and he said, I went to post one of Vinny's poems, and I crashed my website, and somebody stole it. So it's all Vinny's fault. Oh, wow. But it wasn't. That was just the next time that he went to it. It had been stolen at that point. But we live in a world where
yes, we do.
He has this little creative writing representation website that maybe he houses 8 or 9 writers, and somebody goes and steals it.
Wow.
So
life happens when we least expect it, regardless of the plans that we make.
It's fine because it goes hand in hand with when I was in high school. They lost my yearbook picture, so it was like I never existed. So it's just one of those things that I just expected to. And you know what? As soon as we're done with this interview, I'm going to go and sign on and look at it tomorrow, and there'll be a glitch and it'll be corrupted, and it was like it never happened.
Well, look, so, I want to thank you because you are an incredible man. There's something special about you, Vincenzo. I don't know what it is, the level of transparency. I don't know what it is. It's just, you make the perfect guest, and I'd like you to come back whenever you'd like.
I would love that, and I thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful hour and a half that I spent with you. I really appreciate it.
My last thing to you, your favorite Motown song. And I'll tell you mine.
Oh, my. Well, if you know anything about Berry Gordy, is he worked at Ford. He worked at Ford before he opened up Hitsville. So with Henry Ford, with the assembly line and the interchangeable parts, he brought that same approach to his music. So in one room, he might have somebody laying down the percussion. In another room, he might have the background singers. In another room, he may have the guitarist. And in another room, he may have somebody else. So he would take everything and he would put it together. So I don't know. It's a hard. It's like asking me, which is my favorite writer. But favorite Motown, I would say probably Tears of a Clown.
Really? Mm-hmm. All right. I would say, or I always said, Someday We'll Be Together by the Supremes.
Yes, another great one.
Or Reflections by the Supremes. That's another good one, too. That's another good one. Okay, we can talk later.
Let's make that the theme of our next show.
Yes.
Motown.
Motown. Hitsville.
And I'll write you a poem to commemorate it.
Okay. I like it. All right. Good night to you, Vincenzo. Good night to the listening audience. And as I share with you every week, that poetry reads somewhere throughout the land. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you, sir. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio, is available on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. You can also check out the website at QLPOR.com.